HandymanBot. Follow me, Instagram, @YourHandymanGame.
All right, chat. I hope you guys had a nice day. I'm gonna go offline. I guess I'll try to find something to watch for a tiny bit before I pass out. World stuff right now. Maybe it's all uphill from here, though. Everybody, we'll see. I will see you guys either tomorrow or the next day. Oh man. If you guys get lonely, you should chat. I hope you guys had a nice day. Alright, chat. I hope you guys had a nice day. I'm gonna go offline. I guess I'll try to find something to watch for a tiny bit before I pass out. World stuff right now. Maybe it's all uphill from here, though. Everybody, we'll see. I will see you guys either tomorrow or the next day. Oh man. If you guys get lonely, you should talk to each other maybe and find some friends to play games with if any of you play games. I feel like people are always too scared to meet new people, try to meet others. Anyway. Goodbye, everybody. Like, yeah, I mean each other, yeah, in chat. Because you probably have, there are probably a lot of like-minded people in the chat at this moment, you know? Have a good night. See you guys tomorrow or the next day. Boop.
Do you go live and feel like you're streaming straight into the void?
All right, chat. I hope you guys had a nice day. Oh, I take
Well,
his
be
bishop
careful.
first.
Byron Bernstein, known to Twitch users as Wreckful, has died. The beloved gamer and esports player had close to 1 million subscribers on the platform and was one of the highest-ranking World of Warcraft players. At the time of his death, he was reportedly working on developing a game called Everland that was set to be released this year.
It was really sad. I wanted to win it so bad.
Bernstein's cause of death has not yet been revealed. His ex-girlfriend tweeted that someone she loved took their own life. Bernstein had opened up about his battle with depression to his followers in the past. Hours before his death, he tweeted, "I feel bad for anyone who has to deal with my insanity." His family and friends have received an outpouring of love from fellow Twitch users, who are also encouraging others to seek help if they are experiencing mental health problems. Byron Bernstein was 31.
All right, chat. I hope you guys had a nice day.
At Ogre Handyman is here.
Are you sure?
officer initiates a routine traffic stop on this white Chevy pickup truck driven by a Karen. What follows is anything but routine.
David 211, I'll be taking position 2. We're passing Old Howell Road. 520 will be position 1. Copy the sticks position, passing Howell Oaks Drive, speeds 35. Passing Fiddler's Creek, speeds 30.
Well, I've begun the teardown of my personal rig to build my personal rig. Yeah, that. So we're bringing Skunkworks back, and this is the GPU that was actually in my rig right now, the HS420 build for about the last 7 months. The thing is, it's been using liquid metal. And liquid metal is something that every single PCB expert that has ever done PCB repair has said, don't use liquid metal. So I'm really curious now, did it stay where I put it? I had a little moat I tried to do and I just tossed it because the foam kept tearing, but I did all the proper insulation of all the SMDs around the die. And I'm curious though, after having a big discussion with Der Bauer in Computex about the gallium effect and the corrosion that it can cause to different blocks, I'm curious as to how well the Deltamate block has held up with liquid metal, his liquid metal by the way. And I'm curious, did it start to pit it? Did it start to corrode it? Because we had a big discussion about the different types of coating he uses specifically for gallium and non-gallium use cases. So, it's only been 7 months, but that's long enough for bad things to have happened regarding liquid metal. The GPU still works, so I know it didn't migrate to places it shouldn't be, but I'm curious now, how well did it hold up? And I'm gonna be reinstalling a new block and not using the Deltamate block in my new build just because of aesthetics purposes. This is also actually the new AlphaCool Core GPU block, not sponsored. I bought it, but here's the thing. It's like half the price of all the other blocks that you find on the market. Well over 400 bucks. This is in like the $225 range. Still expensive versus what they used to be, but a lot more reasonable than what modern blocks cost. So I'm gonna take a temperature hit by getting away from liquid metal and by going with probably a lesser dense block than the Deltamate, but this is why I do these in my personal rigs. I gotta run them every day to see what they're really like. If you're building a PC that's meant to be seen, then check out the new Atlas P6 CG from Gemdias. This isn't just another fish tank case. The Atlas P6 CG features a massive 270-degree curved tempered glass design that gives you an uninterrupted view of your hardware from almost any angle. And for those of you who spend way too much on collectibles, don't worry, Gemdias thought of that too, and it actually includes a dedicated display platform with its own spotlight. Cooling is handled with 4 pre-installed ARGB PWM fans, and the chimney-style airflow layout that pulls cool air from the bottom and exhausts heat naturally through the top and rear. It also supports up to 360mm radiators, GPUs up to 425mm long, and even rear connector motherboards for a cleaner cable management look. You also get USB-C on the front I/O and includes an ARGB hub, adjustable GPU support bracket, and a dual chamber layout designed to keep your build looking as clean as possible. So if you want a case that's equal parts airflow, showcase, and conversation starter, check out the Gemdias Atlas P6 CG at the link below. I was to take you guys along for the ride on the teardown because my biggest concern right now with the liquid metal, what size is this, is the fact that, that's not right. I'm concerned when I go to take the block off. I have to be really careful. I don't want it to drip, or because it can drip, on anything else on the board.
At Ogre Handy.
At Ogre
Handyman.
Isopropyl alcohol just to guarantee that it's all off. But it can turn into quite the nightmare if it starts to get in places you don't want it, because the liquid metal is just that, a liquid, and it moves easily. So I have to take this plate off the back of the card because the Deltamate block replaces the weird chrome looking, where'd it go? I don't know where it is. It's somewhere around. Oh yeah, this guy. It replaces this guy with his, which ties into the block and everything. So I need to take this off. You know, if I were smart, I'd go get my little, sounds like a dental drill screwdriver. You know what? I am smart. I'm gonna do that. Open wide. So People always ask me, Jay, where'd you get this screwdriver? You'll never guess in a million years. It actually came with an Asus product years ago. I forget which product it was, but it came with it. It's also where I got like that Asus ruler made out of a PCB. I don't remember what product it came in, but when it comes to like doing the blocks and stuff, it's really nice because it's a low torque device, so you're not gonna over tighten things. In fact, it can barely loosen the screw, right? Charges on USB-C, it charges really quickly. It's got a little light on it.
And compatible with iFixit bits.
Mm-hmm. I'm not gonna really miss the matte material here, because look at that.
It looks like a mess on the camera.
Dust was absolutely like always sticking to this. We live in a desert. Dirt is everywhere. Skunkworks always gets dirty. The filters on that worked really well. Skunkworks does not have filters. So Skunkworks gets dirty. The dirty, dirty PC needs to be punished. Okay, that was the last screw. So this should be able to come off now. There we go. Oh, you see that little pancake flip I did with the, yeah, watch. Oh, damn it. Aw. So I want to put all my thermal pads back where they go. Okay, I'm gonna do this now though, because I do not want the block to pop off. There. All right, so it should just be the 4 perimeter screws, a couple here. So I'm gonna start, okay, really crank this down. Careful. Careful, Annie. Ooh. Careful, Annie. Whoop-ah. And look, that's why you insulate the SMDs around your core. Look at that ball that formed right there. I could have popped there right now, but still. You know what though? Holy crap. I'm going to assume right now it has not really had any negative effect on the core, on the material here. But look at this. You see this little like drip right there? That just happened right now when I lifted it up. So I need to make sure it hasn't gotten on any of the memory or anywhere around it. So I have to do a very thorough cleaning on this. And what I'm gonna have to start with is getting like the Q-tips and like trying to suck up as much of that as I can with the Q-tip. That way it doesn't just smear. Because if I put alcohol in there and wipe it, it's just gonna smear it around and it turns into a really nasty mess. But if I just do a quick wipe on the block, I think the block held up pretty well. I mean, it should. DeBauer, oh, look at that.
Wow.
Okay. I could have continued running this without a problem, obviously. He clearly designs his product with this kind of stuff in mind. So you don't actually wipe liquid metal, you just sort of reform it into a gianter ball. So this is toxic. Don't let it touch your skin and stuff. At least you shouldn't. I don't know a lot about his formula. I know it's, see how it's just smearing around? I know it's a protected IP of his, but yeah, isopropyl alcohol will neutralize it and then I'll be able to wipe it easily, but yeah.
And can't eat it?
Yeah, I mean, you can eat it. You can physically eat the thing, yes. You shouldn't, no. I don't think there's any sort of pitting or corrosion on there. Nice. Okay, so the block's pretty good. We can move this out of the way. Look, as somebody that's trying to learn machining and stuff, fuck you, DeBauer, with this being as good as it is. Seriously. I'm like, what the hell? Obviously, this goes through some sort of media blast or something afterwards, but I'm not gonna show you what my attempts at CNC have looked like so far. They're almost that good, though. See, we'll pick up some of it, but if I can even just get it like moved over to where I can just get a big ball of it and let it glob up, then I can actually use the liquid metal needle and syringe to like suck it back up into the syringe. This is reusable. Like, what's on here right now? Sorry, Phil, but
stop! Ah!
It's like literally torture for you. Now these are Kimtech wipes right here, science brand. These are not tissues, right? This is very specific non-fibrous lab wipes. I want to see what happens. Okay, all right. I can hear the pain in your voice. You're like, oh, conduct a nut. Conduct a nut. Conduct a nut. Let's go. Conducted dut. Like I'm losing my mind, okay? Oh, I fell back out. Now you might be asking yourself, Jay, why aren't you, if the liquid metal's okay, why aren't you using it with the new block? I trust that Der Bauer has designed the metal and the coating on this block to deal and handle the gallium. I don't believe Alpha Cool has done any attempt at seeing how well their nickel plating, because that's nickel plating, will handle it. And nickel plating gets broken down by the gallium, so yeah, it's not really sucking it up. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is the brute force method. Now I'm gonna use the Q-tip that comes with his Conductonaut. This is a different type of material than normal Q-tips. This should allow me to, gee, don't fling the thermal or the conductive stuff everywhere, would you? So I'm just trying to get this all over to one side. See how it won't, like, doesn't mix in with the alcohol, but the alcohol allows me to move it all around. See how it's getting all over here in the corner? Now I do have a clear acrylic polish all the way around the core. That's why none of the liquid metal that like leaked over onto it affected anything in a negative way, simply because of the fact that it is got an isolation barrier.
It seriously looks like the worst.
It is. It's like the worst cleanup.
Yeah.
And it's during the cleanup when you're gonna flick it and fling it somewhere that you shouldn't, like right there. Yeah, this is not what you want to do. Now here's the thing, some people will just take compressed air and be like, you know what, psh, and hit it, but then you can send it flying under the memory chips and stuff, and then that's where you'll end up with a problem. So let's see if I can. Look at that.
It just trolls you.
Anyway, this is the process, and there is some that's made its way outside. See, like right here? What I'll be doing is I will just be soaking the shit out of this board in isopropyl alcohol to break as much of that down as possible. Why'd I go all Midwestern? It's as much as possible. Oh, don't ya know? It's so, oh no, look at what, oh Bobby, look what you did. That's what one little drop of liquid metal did when I wiped it with the paper. It's so metal, bro. Something Steve's hair can relax to. Okay, this is what only a little bit of liquid metal turns into. But I obviously need to make sure I get every bit of this up because I really don't feel like having it make its way onto the new PCB. My fingers are burning. All right, so there we go. Clean as can be. Clean as a whistle. But you might be
You_freaky, hey homie, I can share your stream. You_freaky to help hit 1,000 followers and 800 viewers and out.
You_freaky.
I redid the wiring on too. I think this is the card I redid the, yeah, this is one of the cards I redid. Anyway, I lapped this. So what you're seeing right here are the sanding marks because I lapped basically the raised letters off of the die. And when you're doing XOC, clamping pressure and the tightest pressure between the XOC, like the LN2 pot and the die is really important. So to get rid of the raised letters, which is only like, I don't know, 1,000th or 15,000ths of a millimeter or something crazy like that. I don't know what it's really low. It makes a difference. I think that's one of the reasons why this card was performing so well too, was the liquid metal plus the lap. You might see some discoloration around the side right here. Most of the nail polish has come off with the isopropyl alcohol. Although it's not nail polish remover, alcohol does break down the acrylic. So I kept hitting that with my toothbrush and my compressed air to get most of that off. So we're back to a pretty good state now where I can get the new block put on. But you know, this is kind of where this video sort of ends because I was curious, like the question really was, this is the first time I've ever run liquid metal full time in anything. And I was curious as to whether or not it would cause a problem. Now here's the thing, cards that are designed to use liquid metal, that are using it from the factory, i.e. the 5090 FE, have both a moat that keeps it from migrating where it needs to, like it keeps it from migrating to areas it shouldn't be touching, and two, an oxygen barrier. Because what accelerates the corrosion that gallium can cause is when it mixes with oxygen. And so they have like a rubber seal that would go on there too, and when you push it down, it actually squishes the air out and creates almost like a little vacuum. That is not what this was, clearly. So I just was curious if it was, did I cause myself an issue here? No, I didn't. This card has been through hell, and that's why I wanted to reuse this one and not my other cards that I have laying around, because it has survived the XOC. You can see some of my old solder marks right there. One of the ground holes is still filled with solder. There was no point in getting it out. I just took my posts out. That was where I connect my EBC2 to the voltage controller on the card so I could control voltage and droop and all that stuff when doing XOC. And then obviously it survived liquid metal for 7 months after going through all of the abuse I could put it through and me learning how to solder on it. That was the other thing, is like I had to learn how to solder on this guy. But anyway, I guess what we'll do, just to make this video have something interesting to it, I guess you did get something interesting. No ill effects happened because Thermal Grizzly considers their coatings and their resistance to gallium, which is evident. 2, the die can resist it just fine, and the card will survive if you keep it from destroying any SMDs or getting in areas where it shouldn't have gotten. What I ended up doing, just to make sure that absolutely none of that liquid metal that was kind of like getting its way out of where I wanted it to be, completely doused the board in lab grade isopropyl alcohol and let it sit there. And then I took my toothbrush and just absolutely scrubbed everywhere it could have possibly been. And then I repeated that process like 4 or 5 times before I hit it with compressed air. The compressed air allows me to let any of the alcohol that's formed and pooled underneath any of the chips get blown away. And if any of that liquid metal had still mixed with it, it would go too. I have no doubt right now that this board is completely safe to use. I have no issues with it. Like, I don't feel like, almost said LN2. I don't feel like any liquid metal got anywhere it shouldn't be. But you saw, the cleanup is tedious with liquid metal. Just because I ran it all that time without there being any ill effects doesn't mean I couldn't have potentially ruined it putting it back together, because liquid metal got somewhere I didn't realize it should have been. And liquid metal can bridge pins and connectors. It can completely dissolve solder as well, so it could get on SMDs, and then eventually those SMDs can fall off or break loose, or again, ground them. So it's quite literally in the name. It's liquid metal. It is as bad as if I took aluminum shavings and just sprinkled it all over the board, which I guess I could do now if I really wanted to, but I'm not gonna. So yeah, there's a good lesson to be learned there. So anyway, we're gonna go ahead now and move on to the installation of the core. The reason why I'm showing you making that sound, well, I didn't mean to drop my card right there, is the weight difference between these two cards is kind of crazy. I do feel like blocks have gotten, or I said card, the block. I do believe they have gotten heavier than they need to be, and I'm gonna weigh them right now when I get this block out of here, because it's a little crazy. 2.5 kilograms. It's pretty heavy. If I now take out the core, 1712. Still heavy, but absolutely lighter than I expected it to be, and I'm okay with that because that's a lot of weight to be putting on the PCB slot and the card sagging and any of that stuff. So I'm hoping that we won't have too much of a sag issue, because there is no anti-sag mechanism built into Skunkworks at all. All right, this shows what a piece of shit EK was for all them years. Look at this, all pre-cut thermal pads. And I remember a while back, I was like, why does EK not have pre-cut thermal pads? And it was like, because the labor is too much. So anyway, clearly AlphaCool found a way to do it. So, 6 for Weichnes, Avis der secured. Safety instructions. Varmelton paste off
Gauge web, what is we watching?
Like, I can make fun of German, it's literally, my mom is from Munich, okay? All right, so this is showing where the yellow pads go. These are all 3mm thick, that's for backplate. That is the back of the graphics card right there. These are all 1mm thick. See, that is the best way to do it. You design the block Z-axis so that you use the same thickness thermal pad everywhere, by just changing the heights of the components on the block, right? The highs and lows. Instead of like, I know I'm coming back to EK, that's because I have the most experience with EK blocks for 2 decades. EK would have like, here's a 3mm pad for this area, here's a 2mm pad for this area, here's a 0.5mm pad for this area. So instead of having the block heights be like tight tolerances to where they needed to be, they were just like, oh, bigger gap, bigger pad. But then what happens is you have to account for the lowest common idiot. And what basically happens there is somebody puts a pad in the wrong spot, and then it doesn't make good contact where it's supposed to, i.e. your block no longer makes contact with the die like it should, because you put too thick of a pad, say, on the memory, and then you're overheating and stuff. So having all 1mm pads is so refreshing to see. And look, the blue pads, blue goes where that's showing. Yellow goes where that's showing. So this is having me apply the pads to the block directly, and then it's having me apply the back plate pads to the parts right there. Ooh, look at that. It's interesting that they're not actually having me touch the back of all of the POS caps and such. They're having me like use this square pad to go around that. That's interesting. I've literally never seen that before. I mean, look, even Der Bowers touches the back of the POS caps, not the perimeter. So Phil wanted me to show you guys, this is the thermal pad wicking, right? So in the first Skunkworks video, we showed you how in the back of the 4090, it wicked through the screws, right? But think of it as, it's a hot summer day, and this is your underwear, and this is the sweat. It just sort of wicks. This swamp ass, yeah. Okay, so I'm not gonna take you guys along for the ride of putting all the pads and stuff down. I'm gonna follow the instructions, put it together right now. It's been a long time since I've actually used an Alpha Cool water block. Their Core series stuff, I didn't get a chance to check them out in Computex, but I'm actually really pleased with their new designs. This is gonna match the block that's in there. That's the same series as this, so it's gonna kind of match nicely, because I'm taking that block out and putting it on this board in that system. So yes, these 3 systems are getting torn down, but it's okay. It's a labor of love. But pricing wise, real quick, I wanna point this out. Like, dude, I'm telling you, block prices are nuts. Even the brands you wouldn't expect to be expensive, like Bike Ski. I mean, Bits Power, yeah, I kind of expect them to be expensive, but like Bike Ski, Barotech, like those guys made a name for themselves by being the affordable brand. And then now that they're like $400+ for their blocks. So if I look up 5090 Astral block, this was $289, that. So more expensive than they used to be. Like it used to be like 120 bucks for a full cover block. $289. It has only 4 reviews, but still it's brand new. The EK Water Block Quantum Vector 3 is $404. The super generic, doesn't even have a name, Copper GPU water cooling block for 5090 Astral is $280. I'd much rather go with Alpha Cool because I trust that.
Of price fixing and monopolistic behavior and intentionally reducing output to increase the demand and increase the pricing. The first time around, we saw major fines in the hundreds of millions of dollars, and sentences into prison time for some of these leaders. So maybe we can keep our fingers crossed. It'll happen again. I don't think anyone would cry about seeing any of these execs hauled off to prison. And our second major story is going to be Sony ending physical games by 2028. We'll talk about what that means. It kind of ties back into a couple weeks ago when we talked about licensing agreements and whether or not you actually own the game. Believe it or not, Sony is a distributor. They also don't own the game. So it's kind of a domino effect. We'll talk about what the potential fallout from that could be. And then, of course, we've got a lot of other rapid stories to talk about. So get your favorite cold one, warm one, blaze, I don't care. Do whatever you want. Sit back, relax. We got a lot to talk about today, and it's going to get a little dicey. So let's just go ahead and get right to it. So the return of the DRAM cartel. Actually, it's not even really the return. Look, if there's anything we've learned about watching movies about cartels, right? I'm gonna say movies because I don't know anything about the cartels in real life, but you chop the head off, a new one grows. It's kind of an amazing trick, right? But anyway, the DRAM cartel continues, if you will. This is totally repeating itself, allegedly. It's important that we use the A word here because right now, as of June 25th, a new California class action lawsuit accuses Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron, the three companies that control roughly 90% of the DRAM market globally, of coordinating production cuts while providing capacity towards AI-focused HBM memory. Now, the plaintiffs allege this artificially restricted consumer DRAM supply and contributed to prices rising by more than 700% since 2022. Now, these are allegations. It has to be proven in court. But the cool thing is at least somebody is paying attention to this. And I think there was even a comment in the last week's video when I talked about the DRAM pricing, and someone was like, yeah, but you need someone to actually look into this, and nobody cares. Well, it was like right after that earnings call from Micron, like literally the next day is when this lawsuit was filed. And the cool thing is, these earning calls are almost like admissions of guilt sometimes because they talk about their strategies to the investors, and everyone's listening, including the Department of Justice. So, you know, here we are in California now with a lawsuit that is now kind of hoping to dig into this to whether or not, you know, this is something that is legal in terms of the level of pricing that they're putting out there. Now, the previous DRAM drama back in the early 2000s, the industry was caught with one of the biggest price-fixing scandals in tech history. Now, in March of this year, Steve put out a great video called The DRAM Cartel, and it covers a lot of the history, including the early 2000s, and about how we're kind of going full circle on this again. It's almost like these execs forgot. You know, you're not immune. I know there's a tech oligarchy kind of taking place, but guess what? You're not immune to this. So anyway, so the too long didn't read version of the early 2000s scandal was that Samsung pleaded guilty, SK Hynix pleaded guilty, and multiple executives served prison time, and hundreds of millions of dollars of fines were issued. Now here's the thing. Hundreds of millions of dollars of fines right now would still be quite impactful on all of these DRAM companies when it comes to their bottom line, especially when it comes to their investors. Because when hundreds of millions of dollars go to fines, guess who doesn't get any of that money? The investors. So it's going to be a really interesting story to see how this one plays out. Now, this isn't a random comparison. This is literally the same industry with the exact same companies allegedly doing exactly the same thing. The difference is the demand is higher than it's ever been, than it was back in the early 2000s. As that was post-dot-com boom, but the rise of the personal PC, online hosting, websites and such, that was growing massively then. So data center build-outs and such was happening then as well. And we're just seeing this happen now in a undeniably larger scale, right? Now, here's the question. Are they doing it again? And this lawsuit is intending to find out. Now, the important thing here is that with this new class action, these are only allegations. But what makes these impossible to ignore is the fact that the industry has already been convicted of doing something very similar before. Now, the only thing that could have possibly have any impact on this would be if laws have changed. And no, guess what? Price fixing and market manipulation laws haven't changed. If anything, they've gotten a little tighter since the early 2000s. So keep your eyes peeled because this is going to be one of those Michael Jackson popping popcorn moments because I don't think any of us are going to shed a tear for any of these execs that might lose their entire livelihoods and do prison time because of the decisions that they're making. Now, here's the irony. South Korea, where these companies are headquartered, are doubling down, where their governments are actually getting involved in helping subsidize a lot of their costs to build more fabs. So it's kind of getting crazy here. So while this is happening, South Korea announced $520 billion in long-term public-private initiatives centered on Samsung and SK Hynix to expand semiconductor manufacturing, including new fabs and HBM production facilities with a strong government backing. So here in the U.S., this is not the same thing because they're not manufactured here in the U.S., but they're doing business here in the U.S., obviously, and that is the part where the U.S. government can get involved is in market manipulation. The way that it's being looked at in South Korea is because that's where they're being manufactured. It is in the country and government's best interest to always be able to meet the demand, and if the demand is growing, grow to meet larger demand. So for them, they want to be involved in helping these companies be able to scale and expand faster. The irony is, if we talk about the Micron story last week, Micron with those SCAs or those strategic customer agreements being upfront payments were supposed to also be payments that are to help source funds to build those fabs. Now, Micron is a US-based company, whereas SK Hynix and Samsung are overseas. So Micron isn't getting the quote-unquote government assistance, at least that we know of right now. There is the CHIPS Act, which is they absolutely are getting money, but maybe not to the scale that South Korea's government is providing SK Hynix and Samsung. But the fabs here in the U.S. are a lot harder, a lot more red tape for them to pop up as versus like what they could do in South Korea. So it'll be really interesting to see how this one plays out. Now, in the end, it's not really about RAM. Okay, it's about who controls the future of computing. And right now, that is the RAM companies. And the RAM companies have never had really this level of control of an entire industry. In fact, they have a level of control over industries outside of their industry because DRAM and the silicon and the NAND is used in so many different industries. Cell phones are being affected. Game consoles are being affected. Obviously, personal PCs and data centers are being affected. We know people that do digital hosting for websites and stuff. They've had to increase the cost of their own website hosting because if they need to expand a rack, like if they need to build out more racks, they are paying the same crazy inflated 700+% prices as everyone else. So they are not just affecting a single industry, they are affecting an entire global economy. So that's why it's important that this get looked at. So it's not just memory. Anyway, memory is even more valuable, and it's not because of gamers. Now, whether the lawsuit succeeds or not, the memory industry has become one of the most strategically important industries in the world. And when something is that valuable, history has a funny way of repeating itself. Sony sunsets physical games. Now, look, I know a lot of you may be on the younger side. You're like, what the hell is a physical game? Football? Soccer? Tennis? No, the actual disc. Those aren't coasters. You know, they're not coasters you put down on your table to protect a water ring. Those are what the movies and the games used to come on. Before that, it was a tape that actually had to, anyway, I digress. Really dating myself here. I actually had a Betamax. Okay, I really digress. This week in an official blog post, Sony announced that beginning January of 2028, every new PlayStation title will be digital only. That means no discs, no physical copies, no used games, and no collector's edition with playable media. Now, you could still get the collector's edition, which comes with a physical statue or a medallion or whatever the hell it might be. It just won't be there won't be a disc in there, right? And that's going to be a really weird thing for a lot of us older folks. And I think a lot of younger people probably don't even. There's a reason why these are sitting right here. You know why they're sitting right here? Because they're relics. They're relics. And you know how many people have actually reached out to me asking to buy those? No. Fuck no. Those are mine. I earned those through the gray hair, okay? Anyway, I digress. Sony says this reflects consumer buying habits, and with digital sales now overwhelmingly dominating physical. Now, we are talking about the outrage that we're hearing right now, like a lot of people that are super pissed and all the memes going around. It is a minority group, but it is a very loud minority group. In 2025, Senior Director and Video Game Industry Advisor at Circanium, Matt Piscatella, reported spending on physical video game software in the U.S. has been cut by more than half since 2021 and is now more than 85% below its peak in 2008. Now, that makes sense. In 2008, everyone relied on physical copies, hell, even PC games, because our internet was not great back then. We were still talking like DSL was like one of the best that you could get at the time. Like you could potentially get maybe a 1 gig or no, back up, a 1 meg or maybe a 5 meg internet. But in 2008, the internet infrastructure in the US is way behind everywhere else in the world, and it kind of still is. Anyway, generally, Sony says 80% of their game sales are digital. And that's really not that surprising because we've seen PCs go digital when it comes to games, obviously with Steam and GOG and all of the other downloadable platforms, right? Xbox pushes Game Pass, and Nintendo introduced game key cards, which is funny. It's literally a physical card with a key on it to download the game on the Switch. But Sony is simply the first console manufacturer to officially sunset physical copies of anything. Now, here's the crazy part, though. The irony here is that Sony also made a strong argument against digital because of the licensing that takes place between Sony Digital Entertainment and then the studios that make the movies. See, let's rewind here for a second. We talked a couple weeks ago and you guys got really mad at me, and that's fine. We're allowed to have opinions and they're allowed to differ, okay? Licensing for you, by the time you've licensed something, it has been licensed multiple times along the way. You see, you have a movie that's made. You got a company that has written the movie, and then they hire the crew and they hire the film company, the labor unions, whatever, to make the movie. Then that movie has to be sold to something. That something is sold to, I don't know what. That's why if you ever watch the beginning of the movie, you're like, a so-and-so film brought to you by a such and such association in accordance with blah, 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 right? That's why you see all these things. These are all the companies that got involved to make this movie. They need a way to distribute that movie. And back in the day, the distribution was they printed a disc and they sent it off to Circuit City, Best Buy, CompUSA, Walmart, wherever, right? And then the customer walks in and goes, huh, this looks like a good movie, and walks to the register, and that's how it was distributed. Now we're talking digital distribution. And Sony Entertainment, Universal Pictures, Warner Brothers, all of them also licensed that movie from the studio that made the movie. So it's been licensed, there's a license agreement there. And then when you get the movie from Sony, Warner Brothers, Universal, you have a license agreement there. You could still have a license agreement that's good here. But this agreement with the studio and the actual film company that made the movie, that can expire before your agreement expires with the distributor. That's how Sony just removed 551 movies because their license agreement with Studio Canal, which is one of the main licensors of digital movie content with big distribution platforms, expired. So 551 movies removed from your library that you paid for. So this is where the outrage and the argument comes from. Like, wait a minute, I bought this movie. I want to watch this movie. Why is it no longer in my digital library anymore? This is something that's actually been going on for a long time. We're going to go back to Blu-ray content. Before Blu-ray was out, there was digital, like DVD, right? Digital video disc, and then Blu-ray discs. But with Blu-ray, there was a little buying incentive to, hey, if you buy this physical copy, you also get this Violet key. If you have no idea what Violet is, it's probably because you're too young. Violet was one of the early movie distribution platforms where you could take your physical copy, put this key into Violet with an account that you've created, and now you have a digital version that you could watch this movie on. Here's the problem with that. That also expired. It was not a movie that you had access to forever in the digital platform. I can't tell you how many movies from my Violet account have disappeared over the years. But what's crazy about that is the fact that you go to Target or Walmart and you go to the digital movie section, which is very small these days. Do you remember the bargain bin? You remember going into the checkout line at Best Buy and there was always like a metal bin in the checkout that just had like $5 movies? A lot of the times these movies had those digital download keys as well. But you know how many of them were expired before you ever even bought it because of the age that's transpired? It wasn't a license that started from the moment you activated it. It was a license that started from the moment it was packaged. So there were so many movies that I bought in the bargain bin that I never even got to do the digital download with it because the digital download key was expired before I even bought the movie. So that's where the nuances of licensing comes in, and it's really, really crazy here. Sony talked about the dangers of digital only because of that, only to now say they're going digital only when it comes to games, which is essentially the same thing as a movie. So it's really ironic what Sony is doing here. Now, the crazy part is the fallout effect that this is going to have. Now, look, I am not telling you to feel bad for GameStop. We all know GameStop are just thieves when it comes to their trade-in values, right? But let me tell you, if you're not the kind of person that's trying to go and sell things to GameStop, walking in there and buying a secondhand game for a third of what the game initially cost, you don't care about the additional download stuff you got, right? You buy a game and there's like, hey, go on to the store and use this key and get this skin or whatever. You don't care about that. You just want the game. GameStop was great for console gamers. Some PC games, okay, maybe somewhat. But console gamers lived off GameStop for decades because they could get games a lot cheaper. You get the game home, it's scratched, it doesn't work. You go to GameStop, they just swap it out for another disc. It works. Hey, hallelujah, you're up and running because it wasn't DRM'd to an account. This kills that. So don't feel bad for GameStop, because again, GameStop, like I said, were just downright legal thieves with offering you, what, $16 for an Xbox 360 console, and then they would turn around and sell it for $150. That's just highway robbery. But the used game market is essentially got an expiration date now because of that. So it's one of those things where it's like we talk about stop killing games. It is just going full circle right now. Now, here's the crazy thing here. Stop Killing Games isn't really about physical media. And a few weeks ago, we talked about California's Protect Our Games Act and the steps it needs to go through to become law. And currently, they are in the Senate committee hearings. Now, there's been some changes since we talked about Stop Killing Games and Protect Our Games Act a few weeks ago, because we talked about it was in that argument stage where proponents and opponents of the bill get to argue their side. There's been a few changes here. Now, during that hearing, the ESA argued that private servers for discontinued online games raise legal and intellectual property concerns. And after criticism, it clarified and softened parts of those comments. But the exchange highlighted a larger philosophical divide over who controls a game after it is sold. So it's heating up. Let's just put it that way. We are seeing what appeared to be like these amazing instant gratification access to content, movies, games, other digital things. I'm going to talk about Fusion 360 in a minute. That really triggered me this week. And I know Phil's going to laugh over there because I showed it to him and it's absolutely fucking bonkers. What seemed like great convenience, all of these were licenses that had dates. And we are now reaching the end of those dates. And now we are seeing everything just get tossed upside down because we don't know where things are going to land. It's the same thing happens on streaming platforms too. Let's say you're like, okay, I'm not even consuming digital, like I'm not buying digital copies. I'm not going on Prime Video and saying I want to spend $17 to download this movie. I'm just going on my favorite streaming service and watching a TV show. Have you ever been mid-series on a show that just suddenly is gone? You're like, where the hell did it go? It's not even here anymore. It's not on Netflix anymore. Oh, it's on Paramount Plus. I don't have a Paramount Plus subscription. That's because those different TV shows are constantly moving around too, to where the best dollar for them is going to be. So it's extremely frustrating to see the way that the digital landscape looks like these days. Quick Fusion 360 discussion here. I've been teaching myself Fusion 360 and I've got a long form video coming out where I take you through the entire journey of me going from raw material and a lot of screw ups to an actual physically working, aesthetically pleasing CPU block that I designed from the ground up with no help whatsoever. Just me taking apart blocks, looking at how they're built and trying to design my own. I didn't watch anyone else's videos that's done this. People were like, did you watch Linus's video on what not to do? No, I didn't, because I did not want to be influenced by anyone else's content. I wanted to make it myself. Fusion 360 it's a very expensive software. It is a professional 3D CAD, G-code manufacturing, PCB design. You can design PCBs on it. It is a professional manufacturing tool. Yes, there's SolidWorks and a lot of other things. Just pick your favorite flavor. There's a really neat function built into the manufacturing side of Fusion called deburr. That sounds like a very nice thing to have, right? Rough edges, getting deburred, just doing a clean pass on every sharp edge on the thing that you make. When I clicked it, it said, deburr is a part of the manufacturing DLC. Please upgrade your subscription for deburr. I'm like, oh my God. I've already paid like $1,000 for this software for this year. And now I got to pay more for what seems like the most obviously necessary part of manufacturing? They recognize that and they're charging more for it. So it's like the DLC annoyance in games has now followed me into a whole new hobby that I'm in. Anyway, Microsoft's taken a totally different approach to this, at least for now. According to reports, Xbox is testing a system that would allow, and this is kind of cool, that would allow players to convert eligible physical Xbox One and Xbox Series X games into permanent digital. Would be fascinating compromise, because instead of pretending physical media never existed, Microsoft may be trying to preserve digital future. Referred to as Project Helix, could be an all digital, moving and disappearing from libraries and such. The way Steam does it is if you own a game in your library that licensing ends with whatever publisher and Steam no longer is able to sell it, it doesn't disappear from your library. There are titles in my library, like for instance, The Movies, which is essentially like Sims, but you're building a movie studio and you're actually making movies with your Sims and stuff. That disappeared like 20 years ago from downloadable from Steam, but I can still play it. I can still download it. If I don't have it on my machine, I can still download it. It is part of a repository and an archive that I can still download it because Steam makes sure that you still have access to that game even though licensing may have disappeared. Another case in point, there's a game that I was playing called Driver San Francisco. Kind of cheesy, kind of small. It was actually by Ubisoft. It was from a big title. To distribute their games on GOG because GOG doesn't do DRM. So Steam and you've got and Uplay and all that stuff because of DRM. So it's just ugly and nuanced. But where most gamers are left with their thoughts right now is when you spend $80 on a digital game, do you own it or are you borrowing it? The reality is right now you're borrowing it. That's the way it is. But there are obviously like Stop Killing games and then Protect Our Games and other movements that are happening that are designed to make it so if you spend the money on it, you own it. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's the way it should be. This is just an example of when tech moves faster than the infrastructure designed to support it. All right, time for rapid fire news. We're going to go and talk about here the US PC shipments dropped 7% as the market isn't expected to bounce back until 2029. And price hikes and component shortages take hold as PC market declines. The Omdia report suggests. So this comes to us via Tom's Hardware. It says US PC shipments sell 7% year over year since Q1 2026 versus 2025. And here's the thing. Now we're in Q3 2026. These numbers are going to look even worse as you compare what the second and third quarters are going to look like this year. Anyway, it's the steepest decline since 2023. Now, the biggest hit is obviously the budget market. So back in just a few years ago, you could easily build a $500 or $600 gaming PC that was actually pretty good, right? It would be able to play the modern titles. There was no problems with that whatsoever. The problem is PCs under $500 dropped by 19%. I'll be surprised. That number's a little lower than I thought it would be, because it's not entirely possible to build a PC for $500 anymore, let alone the under 500 segment. So I think that number is going to probably be up in the above 50% drop if we factor in Q2 and Q3 of this year. Analysts expect the average PC price to exceed $1,000 this year for the first time ever. By the way, the average price of a PC, and that's obviously because of just memory and storage. The two smallest things you put in your PC have the biggest price. It's kind of crazy right here. So Dell, believe it or not, though, was the first major OEM to actually grow market share during this downturn. It's kind of crazy. But this is exactly what we've been talking about for months, right? People aren't buying fewer PCs because they're not interested in PC anymore. They're just simply being priced out. And that's why, tying back to the beginning of this news video about the investigation into price fixing from SK Hynix, Micron, and Samsung, who also control not just RAM but storage pricing, we need to see some real involvement there. Intel's only CPU that people were actually interested in just got a $50 price hike. Yeah, we're talking about the Core Ultra Plus series. Remember the 270K and the 250K, which people actually were recommending because you got a bump in core count and you got a slight reduction in price? Yeah, it's a CPU that Intel was starting to kind of get a little bit of people excited for. Hey, you know what? Intel's actually got some pretty good price to performance ratio here. And then guess what? 270K Plus goes from $299 to $349. And 250K increased from $199 to $229, so a $30 price there. It's almost like Nvidia or Intel looked and went, you know what? People will pay whatever the hell price we put on there because of AI, so we might as well. So it's almost like Intel's now following AMD's suit of never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity, and they're doubling down on that. So way to go, Intel. Anyway, this is the first time in a while Intel actually had a CPU people were recommending because the price to performance ratio made sense, and now they decide to raise prices. And like I said, it just feels like consumers will pay whatever the hell the price tag they want to put on there. And that's obviously not true because we're seeing the adoption and sales of PCs decline. So obviously people aren't willing to pay whatever you put on there. All right, so we got former Call of Duty frontman launches a new studio with stop killing game style mission statement. If the game bombs, it goes open source. This one, I've got not a hot take, I've got a serious question on that. So let's talk about what this is first. Former Call of Duty creative strategist Robert Bowling, formerly of Infinity Ward and later co-founder of Midnight Society, has launched a new independent studio called 18 Bravo. Now the studio's mission statement includes a bold promise. If one of its games fails commercially, it will open source the game rather than let it disappear. Bowling says the goal is to ensure that even unsuccessful games can live through the community instead of being shut down and forgotten. The announcement comes just days after the heated Stop Killing Games debate where preservation and game ownership become major industry talking points. And no game has been announced yet, but the studio name 18 Bravo and Bowling's background suggests it's likely working on a military shooter. Now, given the fact he comes from Infinity Ward and Call of Duty, that's kind of a no-brainer right there. Now, I actually love this philosophy, but not every game deserves to become a live service forever. But if a studio is willing to say, if we can't make money on it anymore, we'll let the community take over, and that's a pretty consumer-friendly stance. And we always talk about preserving games, and this is someone actually building that into the business model. Here is my concern. Let's just say they make a game and it bombs, and they open source it. Someone else takes that code, modifies it slightly, makes a successful game that is wildly profitable and starts selling it. What is 18 Bravo going to do then? Is 18 Bravo going to come after that studio and say, hey, we get royalties on that because you took our open source code? Or does the moment you make it open source remove you having any legal attachment to anything that happens to it after the fact? Everything we've talked about in this news article, this news video today, has started with what seemed like good intentions where no one ever thought about the tail end of that era. So the same thing could happen here. It could sound like a great thing that could absolutely backfire dramatically if that question isn't answered up front. So think about that, right? Put yourself in 18 Bravo's shoes. You spend a lot of money developing a game. It costs a lot of resources and money to develop a game. Millions and millions of dollars, okay? If you're now have taken a loss and you've written that off and you're now in the red and you're trying to work on your next potential thing that you're hoping will not only be successful, but be successful enough to pull you out of the red into the black for your previous failure, and someone takes your previous failure and makes it successful off of your hard work, are you going to let that go? I don't think people will. That's my concern with that. So it sounds great and all, but I think it has some potential legal repercussions later if this isn't really thought through. Another thing I want to talk about here, right now in that Protect Our Games Act, there was actually a statement made by one of the legislatures that wildly suggested Minecraft servers, private servers, is piracy. Could you imagine? Minecraft is still the most popular game on the planet. Could you imagine if private servers were deemed piracy in order to shut down through a bill that was intended to protect games? The crazy part is Minecraft provides the server code. Minecraft says, build your servers, modify it, turn it into a true sandbox, do whatever you want with it. And then some suit says, that's piracy. Buckle up. It's gonna get wild. You know who else should have buckled up? Dbrand. Dbrand is a perfect example of why you can't simply steal IP, profit on it, and then play victim when you are told to cease and desist your project. I'm obviously talking about the company's companion cube. If you know what companion cube is, it's a portal element. It's from the game Portal, the little cube thing. And they basically made an enclosure that kind of goes like right over your Steam box. So it looks like the Portal cube. Now the problem is that is Valve-owned IP. Dbrand decided to take the design cues of that, model it one-to-one, like exactly as it looks in the game, to make a injection molded cover for your Steam machine, and then sell it. It was their second most popular product they've ever made. They say they spent millions designing it. Then Valve sees it and sends them a cease and desist. Dbrand reached out to Valve after the cease and desist and said, hey, can we get permission? And Valve said, no, not at all. Now, it's also alleged that Valve would have been willing to partner with them had they been approached first. But this is an example of why you can't simply steal IP, profit on it, and then now if you read their post, it's very, oh, poor us. I don't like Dbrand at all, by the way, and I'll talk about why in a second. But Dbrand goes, oh, poor us. We put all this money into it. You put all this money into stealing something that people recognized, which would have been the whole reason for buying it. The reason anyone would have wanted the companion cube is because they recognize it from a highly popular game that Valve put out on a Valve product. So no, I've seen comments too on Twitter where people were like, this makes me hate Valve. So that's like you saying you hate a company protecting their IP. You can't just go around stealing whatever design that you want because you like it and make money on it and expect nothing to happen. Now, the reason why I don't feel bad for Dbrand, if you're not even aware of what this company is, basically prints money by putting skins on phones and tablets and laptops and whatever else. It is stickers, okay? They have made millions of dollars creating stickers. I have also seen over the years how Dbrand goes after other skin companies claiming stolen intellectual property, stolen designs, stolen blueprints. And here's the thing. If you're going to make it fit an iPhone, there's one iPhone design for this, like, let's say we're talking about the iPhone 17 Pro. There's only one way you can make a skin to fit that. It's going to fit the shape. The shapes are identical. But I've seen Dbrand go after other companies and try and either shut them down or just try to siphon sales away from them, claiming other companies are just copies of what they do. Now, what Dbrand does do is they will do a lot of R&D on the type of material that they use, the type of vinyl or just the quality of the sticker, right? The adhesive that's used so it doesn't peel up over time. It doesn't fade over time. It doesn't lift, things like that. Dbrand does spend a lot of R&D on. But to claim that stickers on a product is a copyrighted thing doesn't give me any sympathy for them in this instance because they blatantly stole IP. So, although it's cool, I kind of wish they had just gone through the proper channels, but the problem is that means they would have had to have licensed it back to license. This is like the licensing episode, but they would have to have licensed the IP from Valve to make that product, which means some of that money would have gone to Valve, and I think Dbrand just didn't want to do that. Now, the extra insult to injury here is the fact that Dbrand was automatically sending out those companion cube sleeves, whatever you want to call it. It's like a shell, right? Plastic shell. So a lot of the reviewers that had the Steam Machine had that to show with it. Now, I feel bad for some of the reviewers because they were talking about it and touting and be like, you can buy this from Dbrand. I'm sure none of them looked into whether or not Dbrand had permission to make that. I mean, that's one of the first questions I think I would have asked is like, wow, is this an actual like Valve product? And if they came back with like, well, no, then I would be like, I'm not showing this shit. But yeah, I don't feel bad for Dbrand. It comes down to just theft of intellectual property. There's just no way around it. That's it for this week. I was going to do a Steam Machine roundup. I don't think y'all need me to round up all of the mediocre reviews on it. Obviously, we did our long form video where I showed you the same price as a 2 terabyte non-controller. Although ours is only a 1 terabyte drive. I built a machine that is able to just destroy the Steam Machine in a console form factor. It's about the size of a PS5 in vertical format. And so many people were excited for that video, and a lot of people said they're actually going to copy that build because it fits all of the criteria. Living room friendly, matches into the decor. It doesn't look all gaudy. It's very small form factor. It's roughly the same price if you were looking at a larger capacity drive. The only downside is you can't turn it on and off with the controller, but you can still use the controller for everything else. But if you guys want to check out that video, check the link below. We'll put a link to that. It's actually pretty popular, and I'm excited for that because although SFF builds are not cheap, clearly people are interested. Micro Center has been selling out of SFF product, which shows there's clearly interest there. So, all right, guys, thanks for watching. If you've got any interesting things you think we should talk about in the news, make sure you tip us off. You can email us at, I guess, rtfm@jace2cents.com, even though this isn't the RTFM show anymore. But guys, thanks for watching. Buckle up. Like I said, this was the licensing edition, and right now it's the Spider-Man meme of everyone pointing at each other, but what they're pointing at is who owes each other money. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next one. You know, my headache's worse.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Jay's 2 cents here, and if you can't tell by this table of parts and stuff in front of me, today we're going to talk about some of the beginner mistakes people make. I know I've made this video before in the past, but with the new generation stuff out and a lot of people building their first computers finally, I figured it was time for a refresher to kind of get some of the new confusionness out of the way so that you guys don't build your computer and then go, ah, shit.
NZXT's Build is a quick and easy way to get a new gaming computer. Build a gaming PC on your budget using the built-in configurator and see exactly how your favorite games will perform. Want to build your own PC but still have the NZXT Peace of Mind warranty? Then the new BLD Build It Yourself kit has what you want. Buy it and build it yourself, and NZXT has you covered. To get started configuring or building your next gaming PC, visit the build link in the description below.
So there's a lot of new parts available on the market. Obviously there's new gen graphics cards, which isn't really that important. I mean, PCI Express sockets the same through PCIe Gen 1 all the way up through Gen 5 now. That's not the kind of stuff I'm talking about. I'm talking about how easy it is now to accidentally mismatch your CPU and your platform, or mismatching your RAM, or setting your RAM up so that your PC won't actually boot. Little things like that, all the way down to just some basic building mistakes that you may not even know were mistakes until this video points it out, and you look at your system and you go, huh. You know, we've all done it, we've all been there. I've been building computers for 30 years now, over 30 years now, and it's one of those things where you still make these kinds of mistakes far into like the building experience. So I figured I might at least give you guys a little bit of an opportunity to avoid these experiences by knowing what they are before you ever experience them. So first and foremost, let's go ahead and start with some of the confusion and things to think about regarding the newest platforms from both Intel and AMD. Intel has a brand new socket type called LGA 1700. If you ever wonder what that number means, it's basically just the number of pins. It's just that simple. But LGA 1700 is kind of confusing in the sense that some motherboards will only work with 1700 brackets. Now these brackets are going to be, whether they're AIOs or air coolers, they have to be able to attach through the motherboard in some way. So this right here is an Asus TUF Z690 plus Wi-Fi D4 motherboard. A couple things to think about with that name means. One, Intel currently has both for 12th gen and 13th gen CPUs availability to use DDR4 or DDR5. So first and foremost, it would be easy for you to accidentally get DDR5 because you're like, oh, it's a new platform, it uses DDR5, and then accidentally pair it with a DDR4 motherboard, meaning you'll either have to change your motherboard or your RAM. Depending on the RAM that you got, both could be about the same price. So be mindful of your particular motherboard that you're using for Intel's 12th and 13th gen because of the fact that they are compatible with both, but you have to buy the motherboard that's designed for both. This exact motherboard, the TUF, is available in a D4 and a D5. D4 for DDR4 and D5 for DDR5. But let's talk about the cooler here for a second. Because the CPU socket is bigger and it uses LGA 1700, you're gonna need a compatible LGA 1700 cooler. Now, usually the only thing that denotes whether or not a cooler is gonna be compatible with the new Intel sockets, and there's been a lot of sockets over the years, is basically the standoff spacing. See, Intel doesn't come with any sort of backplate mounted to their CPU. There's some tape on there that got stuck from this backplate. But anyway, it is intended for the cooler to provide its own backplate mounting solution. So what that means is with the additional width, and 1700 being a bigger socket means the square, and it is a perfect square, by the way, versus AMD's always been more of a rectangle, the spacing of the holes gets wider. So what that means is that if you're going to use a bracket that's compatible with 1700, it must come with the appropriate 1700 bracket for your cooler. Most coolers today, depending on overstock that's still sitting on shelves from prior to 12th gen even launching, will include a 1700 bracket, or at the very least, you can contact the manufacturer if it does not have one and request one. Most of the time they'll provide one for free, or you can buy one on Amazon. Usually they're like 10 bucks depending on the manufacturer. But one, you may not even need that. And the reason why I say that is if you take a look at the mounting holes on the motherboard, you'll notice on the 1700 motherboards, the LGA 1700 boards, 12th gen, 13th gen, you might see this kind of a double hole. It looks like a number 8, where there's 2 holes drilled on there. And the reason for that is it's compatible with both 1700 brackets and pre-1700 brackets, meaning these motherboards that have the double holes like this will work with just about any of the Intel coolers in the last like 10 years. So that's something to keep in mind. Most Intel brackets that you'll find now are adjustable like this guy, where you can actually just push the bracket out to match where it is supposed to line up. This particular one right here supports LGA 775, 11.5X. It was really called 11.5X is because there was a 1155 and 1156, and then 1366. But as you saw, it also works, geez, that tape is very sticky. It also works on the LGA 1700 board because the board supports the older cooler brackets, not the other way around. So sort of another mention here though, when it comes to AMD's new AM5 motherboard, and this is gonna probably end up throwing out my shoulder, this board is so heavy. This is a Crosshair Extreme AMD AM5 motherboard. It is the first motherboard from AMD in a long time to beat LGA, which is land grid array, or means the pins are on the motherboard, not on the CPU, which you're typically used to seeing. Now, these motherboards were designed with backwards compatibility in mind, sort of like the motherboard I just showed for Intel. The difference being, if you have to use a cooler that requires the removal of the AMD backplate to use the cooler's own backplate, it will not work. Let me repeat that. This backplate piece right here on the back of the AM5 motherboard, on many AMD motherboards in the past, AM4, AM3, AM3 Plus, would require you, especially water blocks and such, would require you to remove the backplate, the 4 screws that are on there, and then these 2 plastic retention clips that are on here would remove, and then you'd use their backplate and pass through screws, and you would just get rid of the AMD mounting system altogether. That is not possible with the AM5 because these 4 screws on the inside of the back bracket are what's actually holding down the LGA mounting system. So if your cooler says, you know, AM4 and requires that you remove the backplate, it will not be compatible. And that's something that was causing a lot of confusion when AM5 was new because AMD said it's compatible with AM4 coolers. And that's only true if they use the AMD's clip mounting system, which is what's pre-installed on there. One thing to keep in mind though is the AM5 only uses DDR5. So don't make that mistake of thinking that you can upgrade from DDR4 to a new platform and not get new memory. AM5, DDR5, just match the 5s and you're good to go. Honorable mention regarding cooler compatibility though. Another common mistake people will make is this one, it'd be very difficult to make. This is the Chromax air cooler from Noctua. If it has a little plastic cover like this and has pre-installed thermal paste, you're probably gonna be fine. But if it's the kind of cooler that wants you to install the thermal paste that comes separately, and it doesn't have a plastic piece, it might have a piece of clear plastic on the base of the cooler. Make sure you peel that off. Usually it will say, remove before use. It's still easy to install it without removing. 30 plus years, and I've still done it a handful of times just in the last few years alone. Remove the plastic before you install it. That plastic makes a great insulator, not allowing heat to transfer to the block from the CPU, and your CPU will run and it will turn on, but it will instantly throttle, and you'll just be like, why is my computer running like that? Until you take it off, and then you go, oh. Now moving on to RAM, this is where things are becoming much more picky. And I don't mean picky as in like, people are picky. I think most people would just be happy using anything that works these days. DDR4 and DDR5, especially as we move on to DDR5, is extremely picky with QVL. Now QVL is basically the list that says this RAM with this speed and these timings is compatible with this motherboard and compatible with this CPU to be able to run in their optimized speeds. Remember, the speed that is printed on the RAM, whether it be DDR2, DDR3, DDR4, maybe not DDR2, but anyway, DDR3, 4, and 5, the XMP or the Expo that they call it now on AMD, which was DOCP in the past, but now it's called Expo, these are actually overclocks. These are overclocked timing, they're tighter timings and overclocked frequencies that are designed above and beyond the base spec of where RAM operates. DDR5's base speed is 4,000 megahertz. DDR4's base speed was 2133 and then it became like 2400 as it matured. If you had like a 3600 megahertz stick of RAM and you just put it in your system and don't touch it, it's gonna run at the 2133. Or DDR5 is gonna run at either 4000 or 4800 depending on the motherboard itself. Keep in mind, the moment you push Enable Expo or Enable XMP, it is going to be applying an overclock to the memory controller to run the speeds that are listed. What that means is a couple of things. One, it may not even be stable. It may not run. That is dependent on your CPU's Silicon Lottery winnings and the memory controller itself and the listed QVL compatibility between your particular sticks of RAM and the motherboard. So it's very important to always cross-reference the part numbers of the RAM you're trying to use with the motherboard you're picking to, one, make sure that the motherboard has BIOS support for that particular RAM set. If you're choosing a DDR4 build today, it's very unlikely that it's going to be a problem because we've had so many BIOS revisions with motherboards to create a vast supply of compatibility now with different RAM. DDR5, on the other hand, is still building out that list. You'll find that motherboards that run DDR5 are getting nearly monthly updates these days to support RAM as it comes out, because as the RAM gets
Handyman bot, follow me, YouTube, at your handyman game.
Handyman bot.
Is not just what speed RAM and what
At Ogre Handyman
capacity of RAM is gonna be
FY0
supported, 'cause
Handyman.
believe it or not, the capacity itself is also a limiting factor on compatibility. The more RAM, the faster it goes, the more hard it is on the memory controller. Now, one of the things that you'll find out too is if you were running a dual channel motherboard, which is pretty much any motherboard these days with the exception of anything Xeon based or Threadripper based, it's gonna be two channels, channel A, channel B. Just because there's four sticks of RAM in the motherboard does not mean it's a 4-channel RAM or 4-channel motherboard. A lot of people get that confused. It just means there's 2 sticks per channel. So you have channel A1 and B1 and channel A2 and B2. So what a lot of folks will do is sometimes accidentally install the RAM sticks next to each other instead of leaving a space in between them. If you don't reference your motherboard manual, you might be sending this into single channel mode, which is actually giving half of the memory bandwidth available to the CPU, which is going to affect everything with your computer. If you're one of those people right now that look at your RAM sticks and you see 2 next to each other and 2 empty, you're running yourself in single channel mode right now. If you were to pause this video, turn off your system, switch one of these sticks to another channel where there's a gap in between, doesn't even matter if it's the 2 outside or the 2 inside, because it can run in channel A1 or channel A2, it'll be fine. You would see an instant increase in peppiness of your system, responsiveness, app loading times, everything would get better. I see this all the time in our React series stuff, is I would see sticks of RAM next to each other like this. And it's like, stop doing that. The other thing is, if you want to occupy all 4 sticks of RAM because you want max capacity, you may not even be able to activate your XMP or your Expo at all. There's a lot of RAM compatibility issues when it comes to maximizing all 4 sticks and running XMP as the memory gets faster and faster. Again, QVL will tell you everything that you need to know about whether or not you're wasting your money. You would have to decide too, does your particular use case of your system deem that having maximum storage is more important than maximum speed? Then you can probably occupy all 4 and it'll work fine. Again, verify with QVL. Some motherboards, if you occupy all 4, won't even boot, which leaves you going, why the hell are there 4 slots available anyway? We've experienced that where you put 4 sticks in and it doesn't even turn on. But the other thing too is if you want to occupy all 4 and you find that like, okay, QVL says I can run all 4 sticks, you'd be surprised too that sometimes your system will not run if you run 2 sets of dual sticks of RAM that are identical, same part numbers, same speeds, same timings, but they're 2 separate kits of 2 sticks. Putting them together oftentimes will not run. Again, QVL will tell you all of this. So it's a specific XMP and Expo may not run. It is what it is. It's been this way now since DDR4. It's been this way always, but DDR4, as the speeds got faster, it really started showing, and DDR5 with them being like ragged edge speeds from day one, you'll find that it's just running 4 sticks more often than not is not the right way to go. In fact, it's why a lot of high-end motherboards have started only using 2 sticks, 1 stick per channel, especially if it's an overclocking motherboard, because that's how you get the max stability. Obviously, double check too that you are matching DDR4 and 4 and 5 and 5 when it comes to your motherboards and stuff, as I've already mentioned. The notch itself is different. Double check that notch is lining up. It's harder on DDR4 than DDR5. DDR5, it's nearly centered, so you might think you're lined up and it's not. DDR4, it's much more off-centered. Double check that before you go just shoving it down. You don't want to be this guy. Let's move on to storage. Storage is simpler these days than it used to be. There's a lot of storage options. I mean, you've got so many brands out there now with all different types of NVMe drives, and you got SATA SSDs, and we still have, obviously, our hard drives. There's a lot of folks out there that still just, I do myself a big old reliable spinning drive, and then just I spit on that new stuff. I'm sorry if you feel that way. Someday you'll come around. Anyway, drives, especially SSDs, NVMEs, and 2.5-inch SATA drives have really dropped in price. NVMEs are a lot more affordable than they ever been, but yes, they are still somewhat expensive. When you're installing Windows, you disconnect the drive you don't want Windows to be on. This isn't so much of a problem if you're running different size drives and you're smart enough to remember what size drive is what. For instance, I have a 500 gigabyte NVMe SSD right here. This is pretty small by today's standards, and also pretty affordable. You could probably get this drive for like 35 bucks, which would make an amazing Windows drive. An SSD, especially an NVMe drive, makes an amazing Windows drive. You know what doesn't make amazing Windows drives these days? Spinning platter drives. Now this is a 1 terabyte Toshiba, right? Yeah, just a high performance P300, super basic drive. If these were both 1 terabyte drives though, after the partition space and whatnot, they might both show up as like 980 gigabyte or 968 gigabyte drives, whatever it ends up being. You get into the Windows installer and you're just like, oh, whatever, you just click the top one, you might accidentally be installing Windows on your spinning drive. But that wouldn't have been a problem if it wasn't plugged in at the time of installing Windows. So what I do is if I have multiples of the same size drive in there, and they're all NVMe. I don't personally care because of the fact that I'm not gonna go in and unplug my NVMEs, install Windows, and then plug my NVMEs back in, especially if there's a graphics card in the way or it's vertical mounted and rigid tubed, whatever. NVMEs, as long as it ends up on one, past that I don't really care. But if I have mixed drives, like Skunkworks was, I had just a weird pattern of drives all over the place. And when you go to install Windows, you'd see like 92 drives showing up, and a lot of them were the same size. So I really had to get used to unplugging the drives I didn't want Windows on. Also too, sometimes Windows will put the bootloader on one drive and then the Windows OS on another drive, which then if you ever take the bootloader drive out and then the OS won't post anymore. It's weird. So a lot less of an issue today as long as you keep track of which drives are which. Kind of an honorable mention there, something that is still throws a lot of people off today. All right, let's go and talk about power supplies for a second here. This is another one where I see a lot of people really just have the wrong mentality of a power supply. There are so many more things to consider in a power supply than its wattage. Power supplies are not created equal. It's the whole reason why the 80 plus thing even came about. And it wasn't just, 80 plus doesn't tell you just about the efficiency of the power supply. It tells you about the quality of the parts inside the power supply. Because there's a reason why those efficiency ratings go up. The quality of parts go up with it. So what I have right here is just a basic 80 plus 500 EVGA. It's like it's just 80 plus. It's like not even like 80 plus silver, or even bronze, which used to be like the start. It's just it barely makes the 80 plus. Now there's nothing wrong with this power supply. In fact, we use it as our test power supply quite often. But more often than not, you're going to be giving up things like modularity. As you can see, this is a non-modular power supply. As you can see, it's ketchup and mustard cables with like a transparent, non-fine mesh. It's just ugly. But because it's 80 plus, I would trust this with anything that needs up to 500 watts, but I wouldn't trust it if you were on the edge. And the reason for that is a lot of power supplies can provide power beyond its rated spec that it's showing if the quality is there. But you should never spec your system so that you're on the edge of the supplied rating of the power supply, or at least the advertised rating of the power supply. So for instance, this is an RM850X from Corsair. I can't remember what the 80 plus on this one is. I want to say it's gold. I believe it's gold. You can often find the same power supply in multiple ratings. Not so much these days, almost everything is gold. Now when you see a bronze, it's really rare. Almost everything's gold and platinum now. But what you get with something like a higher end power supply is not just a higher wattage, you get the modularity of being able to unplug the cables that you don't want. You get individually sleeved cables as that's the way that they came, at least from Corsair. And just overall, the build quality is better. Fortunately, power supplies are getting smaller. You can get a power supply this size, that's 1200 watts now. Whereas this is an 850, and look how much longer it is. The longer power supplies take up more room in the bottom of your case, which means less room for cable management and just less room for things. And it's like, you should never spec your system for the minimum because of the fact that you give yourself zero expandability in the future. And power supplies are something that can live on for a long, long time in your system through multiple iterations, multiple upgrades, as long as you don't spec it too small. Let the 30 series and 40 series be a prime example. 250 watts for graphics cards was the norm for the longest time. Then came 30 series with the 320 watt 3080 and the 350 watt 3090. Then came the 450 watt 4090 Ti or 3090 Ti and the 450 watt 4090, which can easily pull over 500 watts if you even start to play with the sliders whatsoever. 500 watt power supply would have been enough for what 250 watt graphics cards and 85 to 90 watt CPUs needed back in the day. This clearly wouldn't be enough to be able to run something like an RTX 4080 or 4090 in the future if you were trying to carry that power supply over, which means you'd have to upgrade your power supply. Now, speaking of power supplies, and I talked about cable management momentarily, one thing I highly recommend, and I've taken a lot of people on their first PC building experience. I don't mean those of you watching that are like, hey, I built my first PC because I've watched your videos. No, I mean people that I've literally brought here and never made videos about, and I'm like, hey, you want to build yourself a computer? Come to my shop, we'll do it, I'll help you to learn, we'll have a great time. I see it a lot. People will plug their cables in and then start yanking on the cables to pull them tight and zip tie and cable manage. The problem with that is you start putting a lot of pressure on the headers. The 24-pin header, the 8-pin EPS header, fan headers, RGB headers if plugged in, especially the USB 3.0 or USB 2.0 headers. Those are fine cables on the 2.0s. You could easily rip those out. And you start putting all kinds of unnecessary tension on those headers, and you could potentially bend or break off, or at the very least partially unplug. And then you're troubleshooting your system going, why are certain things not working? Why is my power button not working? Well, because you yanked the front panel connectors so hard you pulled them off. Then you're going through and doing a lot of troubleshooting, and if you've zip tied everything down like it was some sort of a horror movie, like I do in my builds, then you're having to undo 6,200 zip ties just to be able to plug back in your front panel button. So things that you should keep in mind: don't bundle it too tight, don't yank on it too hard to try and get everything cable managed, because you need to think about serviceability in the future. When it comes time to unplug things, if you're gonna need to change out a component, you need to troubleshoot. If you're trying to clean the system or do any sort of deep cleaning, having a little bit of slack on all the cables will still look fine, but it will allow you to be able to unplug cables when necessary and not sit there and potentially cause damage to your headers on your motherboard. Because if you ever try and price out how much it costs to get a header fixed or replaced by sending them to someone like Louis Rossman or Chris Fix.
When I was 12, you just be Googling anything when you're a kid. Yeah. You be trying anything. It was you got sex ed in 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, whatever fucking grade it was. I guess if I was 12, it'd be like, what, 7th, 8th grade, something like that. And, yeah, you just be trying shit to just be like, does this work? And, it did work. It worked, like, pretty well. This is almost the exact, there's only one perk difference. Jesus. That was a good day. That was a good day. Delete the impact casing roll. There. Now I deleted both. Sports Illustrated was my awakening. My dad also had, and I don't know why he kept them. I don't know why he kept them, but I know he kept 4 Playboy magazines on a shelf of just tons of like bunch of different kind of Sports Illustrated. He had like Wine Enthusiast up there. He had a bunch of medical books. So as soon as I saw those, I was like, oh, hell yeah, dude. Sorry, I got some in my throat there. Sounds like camouflage. I mean, they were, you know, it's not like it's like a pretty thin magazine. You know why I kept them there? Like, here's the thing. Like, I know my dad. I know he wasn't just grabbing the Playboy to, like, jerk it. That was just not his vibe. I don't know. Maybe it was. But I didn't consider it his vibe. I'm a Titan. This GM is kicking. Just GM Nightfall is kicking my ass. Any suggestions? Are you doing it by yourself? What are you doing? You're doing it by yourself. Okay, well, I mean, suggestion number one, get 2 people to join you.
Today we're going to talk about coolers and which one's right for you, considering there's a lot of, I don't want to say confusion, but there's a lot of questions now with the higher TDP and temperature of modern CPUs. So we'll talk about the 3 different major cooler types and which one might be right or wrong for you.
We interrupt this video to bring you a special message from... Getting the best CPU cooler in 2026, it can be extremely confusing. How big a cooler do you need for your CPU? What's the benefits of going air versus liquid cooling? What are the best CPU coolers on the market in 2026? Welcome back to PC Builder, I'm Jason. We're going to quickly break down the key information that you need to buy the best cooler for Ryzen and Intel CPUs in 2026. Then we're going to make specific product recommendations at every budget level for both air and liquid coolers. If you get value out of this video, please give it a like and of course subscribe for more cool PC content. Let's jump into it. This video is sponsored by Seasonic. For PC enthusiasts looking for ultimate performance, Seasonic's flagship Prime TX1300 delivers. ATX 3.1 and PCIe 5.1 compatible with 1300 watts powering even the most insane PC builds. The Prime TX1300 now comes with an updated 12-volt 2x6 cables for increased safety and reliability with RTX 50 series GPUs. And Seasonic's digital fan control means the PSU stays cool and quiet under load. If you were looking for no compromises performance in power, thermals, and noise, check out Seasonic Prime TX1300 using the link in the video description. So should you go with an air versus liquid CPU cooler in 2026? The good news is both are solid cooling choices for just about any CPU, but each has their own place in terms of cooling capacity, noise, and aesthetics, as well as value. Air coolers in 2026, they're more powerful and affordable than ever. You can now cool high-end CPUs like the Ryzen 9950X 3D with air coolers under $50 in the US, and they're an unbeatable value for budget builds. As long as the cooler design ensures good contact with the CPU, the only real concern here is the fan, which does typically last up to 10 years, and it's easy to replace on most models. But air coolers, they're not perfect. Air coolers can ramp up noise quickly under sudden loads. They're definitely bulkier for your build. They may need more vertical clearance, and dual tower models can overhang the first 2 RAM slots. But what about liquid CPU coolers in 2026? There are 2 kinds, custom loops and all-in-one liquid coolers, or AIOs for short. I'm going to focus on AIO coolers because custom loops, they're expensive and they're quite complex. In 2026, AIO coolers are more affordable than ever, starting at around $45, and they can outperform air coolers under heavy loads, though most builds won't really reach that level. AIOs also offer a more consistent noise profile, sleeker visuals, and options like LCD screens without covering your RAM slots. However, they do come with a potential failure point, the pump. In 2026, liquid cooler leaks are almost unheard of, but a dead pump means no liquid flowing in the cooler.
Are you sure?
And for budget builds, the extra cost, it just doesn't really make a lot of sense. An AIO also has to be installed properly with at least part of the radiator above the pump. I'll link our AIO installation guide in the video description for more information. So is air or liquid CPU cooling better in 2026? Well, for budget gaming PCs, air is honestly the only way to go. The immense value of air coolers are insane. For mid-range and higher-end builds, personally, I do prefer liquid coolers for the aesthetics and the more consistent noise profile, but in 2026, there's honestly no wrong answer here. It's really going to be up to your preference. For air coolers, most downdraft style CPU coolers are relatively cheap, and some CPUs like the Ryzen 5600 or i5-12400, they come with included downdraft style coolers than we refer to as stock coolers. Now for space-constrained mini ITX builds, there are more powerful and more expensive downdraft style coolers. Budget tower air coolers start between $18 and $35 US, and they're incredibly powerful upgrade over the downdraft style coolers and a staple of budget and mid-range PC builds. Dual tower air coolers start at around $30 US, and they make a huge leap up in cooling performance, now able to cool even the most powerful Ryzen CPUs. Liquid AIO CPU cooler categories are named by the size of the fan that they use, either 120mm fans or the less common 140mm fans. An AIO cooler with two 120mm fans, it's called a 240mm AIO. Three 120mm fans is a 360mm AIO. As the number of fans goes up, the radiator also gets larger. An AIO that uses two 140mm fans is called a 280, and the biggest is a 420mm AIO using three 140mm fans. Single fan AIOs are only about as powerful as a budget tower air cooler, and given the cost, I'd only consider these for space-constrained mini ITX builds. 240mm AIOs are the most common. They start at $45, and 360mm AIOs start at around $60, and they can be incredibly powerful for extreme CPU heat loads. Let's talk about thermal paste. Now, how much do you actually need to use? Well, testing has shown us that using too much paste, it's fine. Not using enough paste does hurt performance. So I err on the side of slightly too much paste, typically making a thin X with 4 very small dots in between. Then I use a paste spatula or other rigid edge to spread the paste evenly across the CPU before I install the cooler. Now, virtually every CPU cooler in 2026 will come with enough paste for at least one application, so you don't necessarily need to buy your own, but a tube of Arctic MX4 with the paste spreader, it's only about $7. Now, personally, I prefer the Arctic MX paste lineup because it spreads easily, while I have had some challenges spreading other paste. Some coolers come with pre-applied thermal paste on the bottom of the cooler. This is generally fine as well. Thermal paste will typically degrade in 3 to 5 years, depending on the paste, and you'll need to clean it off and reapply it, which is fairly easy to do. Check your paste for its estimated lifespan. Now, you can also buy a high-performance thermal paste like Thermal Grizzly Duranaut for about $20 on Amazon, or $11 direct from Thermal Grizzly. But I'd only recommend this as an option for higher-end PC builds, otherwise spend that $20 getting a better cooler. There are also thermal pads available as an alternative to thermal paste like Thermal Grizzly's Cryo Sheet, but again, this is an additional cost. I'd only really do this for higher end builds. Let's talk about contact frames for CPUs. You can easily purchase these for about $10, but you actually need one? Short answer, no for AMD, no for most Intel CPUs, only maybe for like unlocked i7 and i9 13th and 14th gen CPUs like the i9 14900K or 14700K. CPU contact frames replace the stock CPU retention mechanism on your motherboard. Intel's mechanism applies uneven pressure, but this only really matters for high heat CPUs like the 14900K. Installing a contact frame means removing the motherboard retention mechanism, which carries a small risk of damaging the motherboard pins. That's why I don't necessarily recommend it for AMD CPUs or most Intel CPUs, including the Core Ultra 200 series. Even for the i7 14700K,
Handyman bot, follow me.
Okay,
Click.
so how
At you.
big of a CPU cooler do you
Handyman.
follow me?
At Ogre Handyman.
At Ogre Handyman.
5500, 5600, i5 12400F, 13400, 14400, along with locked Core Ultra CPUs like the Ultra 5 225F. These come with perfectly adequate stock coolers. You can add a budget tower air cooler for better noise and thermals. For the i5 12600K, Ryzen 5700X, I recommend at least a budget tower air cooler. For Ryzen 5000 X3D CPUs, I would go to at least a dual tower or a cheap 240mm AIO. Moving up to mid-range gaming CPUs, we've got the Ryzen 7000 and 9000 CPUs in the Ryzen 5 lineup, like the Ryzen 7600X, 9600X, and 7500F. I want you to avoid the Ryzen 7400F and any Ryzen 8000 series APU. For Ryzen 5 7000, 9000 series CPUs, I recommend at least a budget tower air cooler. And honestly, this is probably all you really need as long as your case has good airflow. The Ryzen 7500F and 7600 non-X do come with an included stock cooler. It's fine, but given how cheap budget tower air coolers are, I'd switch it out. Intel mid-range gaming CPUs like the 13th and 14th gen unlocked i5 CPUs, 14600K or 13600K, along with the Core Ultra 7 265K and 27K are more in the mid-range as well. These are harder to cool. I recommend at least a dual tower air cooler, though these are well suited to a 240mm or larger AIO cooler as well. Moving up to the higher end of gaming CPUs, we've got the Ryzen 7 CPUs in the 7000 and 9000 series. This is like the Ryzen 7700X, 9700X, and the big X3D CPUs like the 9800X3D, 9850X3D, and the 7800X3D. These are a little tougher to cool than the regular Ryzen 7 CPUs for sure. I recommend a minimum of a dual tower air cooler for both performance and noise. And these CPUs are also great with a 240mm AIO or larger cooler. For higher-end Ryzen production CPUs in the Ryzen 9 range for the 7000 and 9000 series, so we're talking about the 9900X, 9950X, and the X3D variants like the 9950X3D, a good quality dual tower air cooler is absolutely fine, but depending on how high the heat load is, I would definitely look for a good quality 360mm AIO for the most consistent noise performance. Now for high-end Intel production CPUs like the i9 14900K, i7 14700K, and the Core Ultra 7 and 9 CPUs, while a high-quality dual tower air cooler is fine, my personal preference is for a quality 280mm or 360mm or higher end performance AIO cooler. Let's jump into our best CPU cooler 2026 recommendations. Everything is listed down in the video description. Now price is obviously subject to change, so check out those links for current pricing and availability in your region, and we're gonna add new coolers if we see new values pop on the market. All right, let's start off with the best budget air coolers in 2026, then we'll go to more mid-range air coolers, then we'll jump into AIO coolers, LCD ones, and then of course mini ITX as well. And I'm gonna go rapid. Are you looking for the best Ryzen motherboard in 2026? We've got you covered. Welcome back to PC Builder. I'm Jason. Now, whether you're building a budget gaming PC with a Ryzen 7600X or the ultimate gaming PC with a Ryzen 9850X3D, getting the best Ryzen motherboard in 2026, it's confusing. There are so many different motherboard chipsets, it's hard to know what features that you actually need, and pricing, it's all over the place. So we're gonna break it all down and make specific product recommendations for the best Ryzen motherboard 2026 for Ryzen 9000, 7000, and 5000 series CPUs. If you get value out of this video, please give it a like and of course subscribe for more cool PC content. Let's jump into it. So the most confusing part of buying the best Ryzen motherboard 2026, it's all the different chipsets from B850 to X870, X870E to B550, B650, A520. The list just keeps going. Here's the simple version. Ryzen 7000 and 9000 series CPUs require an AM5 socket motherboard with the pins on the motherboard, which are the 600 and 800 series. The best gaming focused motherboards are the B650, B650E, and B850 motherboards, which generally have between 2 and 3 M.2 SSD slots and offer an array of rear panel USB and network connectivity. The only real difference between these three chipsets is that B650 motherboards, they mostly have PCIe Gen 4 GPU slots, while all the B650E and almost every B850 motherboard, it uses a PCIe Gen 5 GPU slot. PCIe is backwards compatible, so a PCIe Gen 5 GPU is going to work just fine on a PCIe Gen 4 motherboard, and even an RTX 5090, it runs fine at PCIe Gen 4 speed. But there's often very little price difference to get PCIe Gen 5 motherboard, so you might as well get this feature for free. Now for creators or gamers who want an ultra premium motherboard that goes beyond gaming features, we have the X870 and X870E motherboard chipsets. Most of the X670 and X670E motherboards have vanished from the new market. The primary difference between these motherboards Now for creators or gamers who want an ultra premium motherboard that goes beyond gaming features, we have the X870 and X870E motherboard chipsets. Most of the X670 and X670E motherboards have vanished from the new market. The primary difference between these motherboards and the B-series motherboards I just talked about, the X-series boards typically have 4 M.2 SSD slots. They offer extra connectivity in the form of additional USB ports, faster USB ports, generally faster wired networking, and more premium looks and build quality. The X870 and X870E motherboards also offer some niche features like USB 4. There are some cheaper cut-down X870 motherboards that just aren't as good as some of the premium B850 motherboards, so make sure you know what you're getting and why. Let's talk about the ones I don't recommend, A620 and B840 motherboard chipsets. These are cut-down motherboards with PCIe Gen 4 GPU slots, and they do not support Precision Boost Overdrive, which we do really want to turn on to increase performance. These are usually not much cheaper than the budget B850 and B650 motherboards anyway, but for mini ITX builds, they sometimes do make sense as those ITX boards can get expensive. Now for budget builds using a Ryzen 5000 series CPU, you'll probably want a 500 series motherboard which uses the older AM4 socket with the pins on the CPU. I recommend B550 motherboards here as X570, it's pretty much gone off the market. A520 and B450 are limited to PCIe Gen 3. That can create some issues with some budget graphics cards, but if you are going to use a CPU like a Ryzen 5500 that's already limited to PCIe Gen 3, it might be a good value. All right, let's talk about BIOS Flashback, the feature that allows you to update the BIOS on your motherboard even if you don't have a compatible CPU. Gigabyte calls this QFlash Plus. You will need to BIOS Flashback your motherboard if it doesn't come with an updated BIOS that supports your CPU. Now, in 2026, this is primarily an issue for the newly released Ryzen 9850X3D and the upcoming Ryzen AI Max desktop CPUs, as most AM5 Ryzen motherboards in 2026 do ship with a BIOS compatible with all the other Ryzen CPUs. Using BIOS Flashback, it's super easy to do, and we cover this step by step in our How to Build a PC guide, linked down in the video description. So what Ryzen motherboard is right for you? Let's start with motherboard size, and there's 4 sizes to choose from. ATX is the full-size motherboard, and Micro ATX is the 2/3 size motherboards. These are the most popular for regular PC builds. eATX motherboards, they're just the same height as ATX, they're just a bit wider, and they will still fit in most ATX size PC cases, but you should check the specs. Mini ITX, it's a small size used in small form factor PC builds. Storage is a really important motherboard feature, particularly the number of M.2 NVMe SSD slots that a motherboard comes with, and the bandwidth that they run at. Older B550 motherboards have 2 M.2 slots, one that runs at PCIe Gen 4 speed and the other at PCIe Gen 3. B650, B650E, and B850 motherboards will have between 2 and 4 NVMe SSD slots, including that most will support at least one PCIe Gen 5 SSD. Now, I don't recommend PCIe Gen 5 drives for most users. They're expensive, they run hot, and they often share bandwidth with the main GPU slot. They also don't provide any extra gaming performance over Gen 3 or Gen 4 M.2 NVMe drives. And you can check out our best SSD for gaming video for more on that. X870 and X670 motherboards will generally have 4 and sometimes up to 5 M.2 NVMe SSD slots. Now, some AM5 motherboards with 3 or more M.2 drives have one of the M.2 slots running at only half bandwidth at PCIe Gen 4. This is usually shown in the specs as PCIe 4x2 instead of the regular by 4. To best utilize that M.2 slot, you'll want to buy a PCIe Gen 4 NVMe SSD, and it will effectively run at Gen 3 bandwidth, which is still quite fast, and it's fine for an extra storage drive. Of course, all these motherboards will also come with SATA ports if you want to port over an old drive. Rear panel USB connectivity is a big separation point for budget versus mid-range versus premium and creator motherboards. Both the total number of ports and the speed of the ports themselves. These square USB-A connections, those are color-coded typically, the black ones being USB 2.0 speed, good for slower devices like mice and keyboard, USB 3.2 Gen 1 speed, typically colored blue, and USB 3.2 Gen 2 connections often colored red. There are also USB Type-C connectors, which are smaller but faster connections. Most X870 motherboards also come with at least one USB Type-C port running at USB 4 speed, which is probably the most useless thing for desktop PCs, at least right now. Don't spend extra just to get USB 4. In terms of network connectivity, every motherboard has wired Ethernet. Now, some of the older boards are generally 1 gigabit connections, while most of the newer 600 and 800 series boards come with at least 2.5 gigabit speed, some even faster. Many motherboards also come with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth either built in or added in using an M.2 Wi-Fi key. The fastest Wi-Fi speeds are now Wi-Fi 7 on the latest B850 and X870 motherboards. You can always buy a USB M.2 or PCIe add-in card to get Wi-Fi and Bluetooth later. Motherboard audio, it's in the bottom left-hand corner of the motherboard, made up of capacitors, shielding, and a Realtek audio codec chip. You use this audio anytime you plug in an analog device with a pole connector that looks like this, either into the rear panel audio connectors or the ones on the front panel of your PC case. If instead you're plugging in a sound device with a digital connection like HDMI or USB, then you are bypassing the onboard motherboard audio processing and instead using the secondary device for digital to analog conversion. Budget audio codecs, they can sound fine, and they're typically in the 800 series, such as the ALC897. More premium audio codecs have better overall signal-to-noise ratios and additional audio signal boost for front panel headphones, like the ALC1200. The best audio codecs are the ALC1220 or the newer, but similar ALC4080, both of which offer additional encoding and decoding support, as well as support for high impedance headphones when using the front PC case audio plugs. Motherboard VRMs, that's the power delivery in a half square around the CPU. This used to be a bigger issue, but for gamers looking to use a Ryzen 5 or 7 CPU, virtually any Ryzen motherboard is going to have good enough VRMs. If you're buying a Ryzen 9950X or 9950X 3D, you'll want to get a motherboard with a strong VRM that won't potentially overheat during heavy all-core workloads, which we'll go over in the Creator and Ultra Premium recommendations. Speaking of power delivery, every Ryzen motherboard will have between 1 and 2 EPS power connectors, usually in the upper left-hand corner of the motherboard. For boards with 2 EPS power connectors, while you can run it with just one connected, I recommend that you utilize both of them. So make sure your PSU supports enough EPS power cables for your motherboard. Some newer motherboards now also come with an additional 8-pin PCIe GPU connection on the motherboard itself, which is optional to use but can increase the stability of higher-end GPUs. If you do want to use this, just make sure that your PSU has enough GPU 8-pin PCIe cables to support it and your GPU at the same time. Well, almost every motherboard comes with troubleshooting LEDs to help you if your system doesn't boot correctly. Some of the higher-end motherboards come with what's called a postcode readout, which gives an actual code that you can look up to help in the troubleshooting phase. Now, personally, I think every mid-range and higher-end motherboard should have a postcode readout, but unfortunately, this feature is typically price gated behind the more expensive X870 motherboards. One potential issue to be aware of is that users reported higher than normal failure rates for Ryzen 9800X3D CPUs on ASRock motherboards in 2025. ASRock released a number of BIOS updates to address the issue. I did a whole video in early 2026 analyzing failure data over time, CPU sales, and other reports. And based on my review, I believe that ASRock has essentially solved these issues in 2026 when using a BIOS that is 3.50 or later. And they were always fine for Ryzen 7000 series CPUs and many 9000 series non-X3D CPUs. So I'm going to recommend ASRock motherboards for even the 9800X3D and 9850X3D CPUs. But if this makes you feel uneasy, feel free to buy a motherboard from MSI, Asus, or Gigabyte instead. All right, let's jump into product recommendations for best Ryzen motherboard 2026. They're all going to be linked down in the video description. Check those out for current pricing and availability in your region. We'll continue to update this list, including adding new motherboards as they launch. Let's start with the best cheap AM5 motherboard for Ryzen 7000 and 9000 series CPUs. The first motherboard here, I would really limit this one to like a Ryzen 5 CPU, given how relatively weak the VRMs are on it. What are we looking for? We're basically looking to spend as little as possible, and that's why we are going to consider an A620 board here for $80 because this board is insanely cheap. Now, what are we giving up for that? We're giving up Precision Boost Overdrive. That's not a feature on the A series boards. It is on B650, B850 motherboards, as well as the X series boards, obviously. The other thing we're giving up here is PCIe Gen 5 GPU slot because this is Gen 4 only. And on top of that, we're going to give up some USB, rear panel USB connectivity. Let's take a look at the rear panel USB connectivity. You can see there, it only has 4 high-speed USB ports. It does have a Type-C, which is nice. And then it has 2 USB 2.0 ports. This one is $79. There's a Wi-Fi enabled version that is for $10 more that you can also link down in the video description. Check that out. But if you're just looking for the best kind of cheap Ryzen motherboard and you don't really care about losing some of those higher end features like Precision Boost Overdrive, this is the one I would pick up. Another great alternative here for a good cheap Ryzen motherboard for Ryzen 7000 and 9000 series CPUs. And you could even put on this one because the VRMs are really good, a Ryzen 9 CPU. If you absolutely had to, I don't know why you would, but you could. But for gamers out there, this is a great board. $99. It's PCIe Gen 4 on the GPU slot still. However, you get Precision Boost Overdrive with the B650 chipset and also B850. So that is going to give you at least a little bit more performance. Has a built-in rear I/O shield on it with 2 additional USB 2.0 ports over what we just looked at. It looks nice. It's got 3 total M.2s on it. One of them is half bandwidth, but again, that's fine for an additional storage drive. One of them even comes with a built-in heatsink on the top of it. It looks phenomenal. We used this in a number of builds, and it's kind of a no muss, no fuss board if you just want to get into gaming. Let me give you another alternative here, although I would not buy it at the current price. That is the ASRock B850M-X Wi-Fi Revision 2. So it has a PCIe Gen 5 GPU slot on it, which is really nice. The VRMs are decent enough for a Ryzen 5 or 7 CPU. It's very similar to the A620 board that we just looked at in terms of its rear panel USB connectivity. Basically similar layout, right? So 4 high-speed USB ports, 2 USB 2.0 ports. Does have Precision Boost Overdrive on it, which is nice. I wouldn't buy it for $129 when it gets down to like usually more like $110, $1,200, that's where I would look to buy it. Let's jump in the best budget motherboard for Ryzen 7000 and 9000 series CPUs. What we're looking to spend here is anywhere from $120 up to about $150, although that does start encroaching on some of the more premium territory as well. Just check those links in the video description. Make sure you're not overspending in this category. And we're looking for something that can handle any of the Ryzen CPUs, including a Ryzen 9 CPU. We're going to focus mostly on gaming features, so these are all going to have good VRMs, they're going to have good styling, they're going to have between 2 and 3 M.2s, all of them with basic audio, and all of them with at least 4 high-speed USB ports and 4 lower-speed USB 2.0 ports or better on them. Let's jump into my number one pick here. If you're just looking to spend the least amount but get good features, I like the ASRock B850M Pro-A. Wi-Fi, has Wi-Fi 6E on it, has really nice black styling on it as well. And the thing I love about it, absolutely cheap. $120 for a Wi-Fi enabled board, as you're going to see, is quite a bit cheaper than everybody else. It is an ASRock board. We'll jump into some other vendors in just a second. It has 4 high